This is I Was There, when we look back at a moment in history through the eyes of those who were there at the time. In this week's edition, we're going back 50 years to when a man could go to prison for having sex with another man. That all changed on the 27th of July 1967 when the Sexual Offences Act received royal assent. It decriminalised private homosexual acts between men over the age of 21. I'll be joined by three people who've all got different experiences of what decriminalisation meant to them. Let's speak to George Montague first, who is 94 years old. And as a young man, George had to hide his sexuality. George, when did it become clear to you? How young were you when you realised you might be homosexual? Did you even know the word at the time? Good afternoon to you.
Yes, I did, and I was ashamed to say I was just as disgusted as anyone else. Let me tell you what happened while I was in the RAF, sitting with my fellow corporals.
What year are we in?
2 years before the war ended, 3 years before the war ended.
Right, blimey.
And I heard them talking, and they said, one of them said, "I've got one in my hut," and then the next one said, "I've got two in my hut, and if I catch them together, I'll cut their what's-its off." I better not say it.
Yeah.
So I said, "What are you talking about?" The word in those days was brown hatters. That was the word for gay people. I was just as disgusted as everyone else, and I just dismissed it from my mind and thought nothing of it. Never thought anything about it again.
So you didn't feel any kind of frisson and excitement? What's that all about? Literally, it never occurred to you you could be one of these people they were calling brown hatters?
Not at all. Not until I was 30 years old, and I met someone who was gay and became friends with him. We weren't lovers in any way, we just became friends. And he had a young friend who was only 17 and a half, and I met him, and this young lad fell in love with me. He was born gay. He was totally gay in every possible way. And I was a bit horrified at first, but I knew him and got friends with him, and gradually over the next 2 or 3 months, I realized that he was in love with me, and I was so fond of him, and I became in love with him. And he broke my difficulties, and I became a totally gay man.
So you use the expression "totally gay" there.
I was.
And born gay.
That's right.
So it sort of implies, look, this is a separate issue, but I just want to ask the question. So if Rodney hadn't come into your life, would you have sort of become gay, to use your expression, sooner or later anyway?
I'm so grateful to him, and I shall always be. If it hadn't been for him, I'd already had one girlfriend, which I wanted to marry, but it didn't work. I would have found another one, and I would have married, and it would have been a disaster. But I led, after Rodney, I led a completely, totally gay life. Nobody but other gay people knew I was gay for the next 10 or 12 years. And then, at the age of 37, I realized, running my own business, employing a lot of men, I said to myself, "George, you've got to do something about this. If you don't," people kept asking me, "Why aren't you married? Why haven't you haven't even got a girlfriend?" I thought about it. And among my gay friends was a lady who, for some reason, she liked the company of other gay people. I met her, and she got very fond of me, and we chatted and met and went out together, and in the end, she said to me, "I've fallen in love with you. Would you marry me?"
Well, was she? I'm confused. Was she a gay woman or no? She wasn't.
Not at all.
But she knew you were gay.
Oh, of course.
But she fell in love with you.
She fell in love with me, and I couldn't explain anything. Anyway, I said, "Oh my goodness, that would be the most wonderful thing that could happen to me in my life," because I tell you that I am gay, but I've been with women before, and I'm sure we'll make a go of it. We must do everything right to make sure that people look upon us as a happily married couple, which I did.
Okay, so she was, in a way, she was cover for for your homosexual lifestyle, and she was happy to provide cover for you.
That's right. Not only that, she didn't mind every now and again. Okay, go on then, off you go. She knew I had a boyfriend. I always had boyfriend. I had a boyfriend when I met her. I still had a boyfriend, the same boyfriend when we were married. She knew about him, she met him, and she liked him. Off you go. Go on.
Okay.
Go and spend an evening with Rodney.
So, did she have a Rodney? Did she have
Never.
a boyfriend?
No,
she was just still too in love with you.
And I'm very proud to say, very proud to say, she was a virgin when I married her.
But was she happy with her lot then, with you?
I did everything I could. I did a little bit of acting, and that makes it easier.
Yeah.
I did everything I could to make her completely happy and content. I wasn't a poor man. I had plenty of money, and I'm sure she had everything she wanted. And I managed, I'm very proud to say, to give her 3 children. I've got 3 children and 2 grandchildren that I'm immensely proud of.
Okay, so but in an ideal world, you wouldn't have had to do that. You wouldn't have needed cover, which I suppose would have meant you wouldn't have children and grandchildren. But in an ideal world, if homosexuality wasn't illegal back then, you and Rodney could have lived together, been in a civil partnership or even a marriage, and you could just live your own lives normally and openly without bringing another woman into it.
Exactly, but situations in those days was totally different. I'm so pleased that what's happened now, and we're more or less, we're nearly there. There's only a very few very old age pensioners and a few ill-advised young teenagers. Apart from that, we are almost completely accepted.
George, where were you in your life in 1967? Let's just remind our listeners, you were married to a woman who knew you were basically gay, but was sort of happy to sort of provide cover. You had children together, but you also had a lover called Rodney.
That's right.
Who she was happy for you to see. So by the time the law changed, the law was changing, because it was quite a long process. Did that matter to you? Was that a thing to you?
Well, can I say, my character was formed by my biggest hero of my life, which was Baden Powell. I was a very keen Boy Scout. There, you instilled in you never ever tell a lie. Well, I woke 9 years ago. I just woke up one morning, and I thought, I've got to do something about this. Not only was I not telling any lies, but I was living a lie. So I took the bull by the horns, and this has been the making of me, and wonderful.
But so it sounds to me like it didn't matter to you whether the law was changed or wasn't changed.
Well, of course. How could it not matter? Yes. But can I tell you why I did what I did? On the television at that time was a guy who called himself the only gay in the village, and that gave me the idea. I thought, if I'm going to do anything, I've got to do it whole hog, without any embarrassment whatsoever. And that's what I did. I painted a sign, which I've still got. I'm the oldest gay in the village. And I went on the first gay pride 9 years ago. And until that time, nobody but my wife. I thought my children didn't know, but I discovered they did. They did. They had guests 3 years before.
So you didn't So when did you properly come out?
That's it. At the age 9 years ago. What was I don't know, 70-something.
Well, no, you weren't. 9 years ago, 94. You were only 85 then. You were a child, George. It's astonishing. So listen, stay with us. I just want to bring in Sue Elliott, who's co-written a book called Not Guilty, which is. But Sue, go on, explain to us what the book is. I had a quick flick through today. It looks fascinating.
I'm proud to be in it.
Okay, yes. Are you, George? Okay, well, go on, Sue. Go on.
Yes, George's brilliant story is in the book, one of many, and the book covers 100 years actually, 50 years, 5 decades before the '67 Act, and then the 5 decades afterwards. And of course we think of the '67 Act as being a huge watershed, and of course it was, but in a way its importance was more symbolic than real, because persecution of gay men didn't stop after the '67 Act. In fact, it got worse, much worse, in the 70s and 80s. as you may well hear from some of the other lovely guests you've got.
But George, you were arrested once, weren't you, and charged?
Oh, yes. Charged and convicted and fined.
And what year was that? Was that before the legalisation?
Oh, I can't remember.
That was 74, George.
Yes,
was it?
I never remember. But I've told many people all my life, and I keep telling people, I really am one of the luckiest, happiest old gay guys in the world. Right. The police arrested me. They didn't believe me. My solicitor didn't believe me. The magistrate didn't believe me. I was convicted. But I was a very leading figure in the Scout Association. And I was always interested in good publicity. So I was great friends with 3 of the local reporters. And to my great delight, even though they were in court when my case came up, when my case was discussed, they weren't there. And when I was convicted, they weren't there. And when
and this was for something that went on in a public toilet?
Nothing went on.
Okay.
Nothing went on whatsoever. I went there just for curiosity. Being a gay guy in a small country town and village, you want to realise that you're not the only one. And I did that by going into the local toilet, going into the one cubicle, locking the door and looking on the wall. And there, to my great delight, I realised I wasn't the only one. I read, my mother made me a homosexual. Yeah. And underneath...
But then suddenly a copper poked his head above the lavatory
door. Can I just tell you the last line?
Yeah.
My mother... if I gave her the wool, would she make me one? Well, the police were always there. I knew that. That's why I went into this cubicle and locked the door. I didn't think anything could happen. But one policeman lifted the other, looked over the door, and that was it. Just unbeknown to me, the one next door that I took no notice of, the paper, there was a hole in the wall and it was stuffed up with paper. He put his penis through the hole.
Oh, did he? All right.
Let's try. Sorry about that.
It's all right. It's just. Oh, guys, it's just so. It's just ridiculous, the whole thing, isn't it? You know, anyway. So I don't know where to go with that. So we just got a couple of clips from the time. This is basically from people who are, as I understand it, in favour of the decriminalisation of homosexuality, and it's interesting just to hear their language is kind of sort of unhelpful at the same time as they're trying to be helpful. You'll see what I mean in a second.
Oh,
but
yes.
Just put this in context for us, Sue. The Lord Wolfenden had made this report in 1957. How important was that in the context of things? Can you just explain?
I think it was very important because I think the government, when they set up the Wolfenden Committee, they thought they were setting up a whitewash, I think. But Wolfenden came back and said, we've heard all the evidence, and it was exhaustive, the way they went into it. And he came out with the recommendation that it should be decriminalised under certain strict circumstances. And this actually was quite shocking at the time, I think.
Let's have a quick listen to his lordship.
What we've done, or what we've recommended, is that adult consenting males in private should not have their behaviour in this matter brought within the criminal law. In fact, that they should be taken out of the criminal law.
Which would be a major change in the law, of course.
Which would be a major change. We believe, rightly or wrongly, on the medical evidence that we've had, that to permit adult males to behave in this way might itself be a protection of younger people, because they would not in fact turn to youngsters, but would be content with their own contemporaries.
Sir John, what are your own hopes from this report?
So far as legislation goes, if our recommendations are accepted, on the homosexual offences side, there would be, I think, an amount of justice done in bringing this particular form of behaviour into the same category and treated in the same way as other kinds of private behaviour of adult persons.
So this was progressive as far as it went, but it's still sort of equating homosexuality with paedophilia, essentially.
It did, yes, that's right. And that, a completely false link lingered on for many, many decades afterwards. So I think Wolfenden, one of the main thrusts of Wolfenden was to protect the young. And the bizarre thing was, because the age of consent recommended was 21, and that lasted well into the 21st century, in fact. But the age of consent for women having sex was only 16. So bizarrely, the legislators seemed keener on protecting young men from homosexual advances than they seemed on protecting young women from predatory men, which seems weird to us now.
I think you've got Terry Stewart there with you.
Indeed.
Terry, you were where were you at the time?
1967,
Yeah.
I was living in Belfast, in a West Belfast Catholic Irish community, attending a Christian Brothers school.
What a not very excellent place to grow up gay, I would have thought.
Well, indeed, and it lives to that this very day when it comes to the whole issue of equality of marriage and the issue of women's right to their own bodies. That hasn't changed at all. But in 67, I mean, I was a young man at secondary school. I began to be bullied quite brutally in many respects. And it would be many years later that I'd realised what that brutality was about. And it was actually myself suffering from homophobic attacks. Of course, I couldn't really reach out to anyone there because there was nothing there to reach out to. In fact, I would go as far as to say it was difficult to be heterosexual in the north of Ireland in the 60s, let alone being gay.
I just want to play you.
It is not a criminal offence to commit adultery.
I was there, reliving a moment in our recent past with those who were there at the time. Don't forget, we've got episodes covering a whole range of...
George, would you like to say something on here?
Yes, I'm quite proud and lucky and fortunate that due to my singing voice and my singing training, I have a fairly good speaking voice. I hear there, unfortunately, difficult. Was one particular guy. I couldn't be more pleased with the way things have gone. I mean, we went through a terrible time, but things could not have changed more for the better. Now, it is generally accepted that we didn't decide to be that way. We were born that way. There is only about 5 out of every 100. I'm pretty certain of that. 5 out of every 100 men that are gay. Where the lady is concerned, I really don't know.